Valentine's Day, February 14th, fell on a Monday this year, and the Cozy Family restaurant was already almost completely full when I was shown to my seat about 3 minutes before my 7 p.m. reservation. I ordered drinks from the waiter, thanked him, and quietly added that I could find a seat for myself. He nodded silently and left me two menus. I sat with my back to the wall and placed the heavy, plain Italian brown bottle bag, which I carried by its white curled handles, on the empty seat opposite me at the tiny table that was intimately set for two, and leaned a large white C4 envelope against it. I came first and alone. I looked around, suddenly feeling a little claustrophobic after almost 2 years of quarantine, broken only by brief periods of easing of restrictions on meeting people in public places until they were recently lifted completely. It's been exactly 2 years since I last sat at this, once our favorite, permanent table. By regularly, I mean we came here about once a month, reserving this particular favorite spot in advance. The restaurant tonight seemed to be filled with tiny tables for two, which suited the occasion, but after nearly 2 years of restrictions and social distancing, it felt slightly uncomfortably crowded rather than intimate, and I guessed I'd gotten used to the isolation due to restrictions and due to the fact that I worked from home alone for so long. The waiter returned with the bottle, opened it, and poured a sample into a tasting glass. I nodded in approval and asked for only half a glass to be poured before he left me alone again. Of the 25 or 30 small tables in this part of the restaurant, only 3 or 4 were empty, one of them right next to mine, to my left. At first glance, without looking too closely, I thought that my table was the only one with one person sitting at it. Sure enough, I booked for two, and before I even thought that Lydia was late again, as usual lately, I heard the faint beep of my cell phone, indicating a message had been received. I pulled it out of my jacket pocket and pressed a button to illuminate the screen. The time immediately appeared, 19:01. I always use the 24-hour clock on my phone and digital watch. I have been a freelance writer for almost 8 years now, but as a boy and a man I worked for a daily newspaper in Fleet Street for 14 years, starting as a copy boy and in charge of small notices and general assignments, then as a junior reporter, senior reporter, and sub-editor, mostly on late afternoon and evening lobster duty. And while words and facts are important, in daily newspapers deadlines are of paramount importance. As I swiped and tapped the screen to get to my messages, I couldn't help but notice the empty table to my left being occupied as the lady of the happy couple walked past me in a three-quarter coat and a long navy blue dress to sit against the wall. It made me smile for only the second time that day. Well, not a warm smile, I haven't smiled like that for a long time, but it was a cold February evening, and my wife's favorite place would be against the wall where I was now sitting, right in front of the radiator. No, I didn't smile for Lydia. I didn't see her this morning since she left for work early for a strategy meeting apparently. I smiled just for my kids when I took them to school, kissed them, and told them to be on their best behavior tonight. I wonder if I can do the same myself. I arranged for Lydia's parents to pick them up after school and keep them overnight so Lydia and I could celebrate our anniversary without worrying about Sam and Katie. As I said, the tables were quite close to each other, and as the lady passed me through the narrow passage, I caught a whiff of her delicious perfume. They smelled nice, rich, and inviting at first, but became light and floral as the scent lingered for a long time. It was a scent that could awaken emotions and likely captivate anyone who was with her forever. Lucky bastard, I thought, looking away from the phone screen and taking a quick glance at the seat diagonally opposite where the new arrival's partner should have been sitting, but the seat was empty. All I saw was the back of head waiter Joe Jr., who was leaving, and the fresh face of the owner's son, who hurried to greet the next couple standing at the entrance to the room. It seemed that the lady with the pleasant scent was waiting for her gentleman, just as I was waiting for my rather late wife, my wife of exactly 10 years. We always came here, to this very table, or at least to this place. Sometimes there was another table here when we reserved seating for 4 or 6 with high chairs as needed on holidays, although recently only when government restrictions allowed. This is where Lydia and I first met, this is where I asked her to marry me, and this is where we celebrated all our family birthdays and anniversaries, including today's anniversary. This date was romantic for us, not only because it was St. Valentine's Day, the patron saint of lovers. It was also our wedding day, Tuesday the 14th of February at 11 a.m. at the local registry office. We were both 29 years old at the time, and Lydia's biological clock was ticking loudly. We didn't know then, or at least I didn't know, that Lydia was already pregnant with our son Sam. She only told me on our wedding night that she was a week late with her period, but it didn't occur to her until that morning because of all the stress of preparing for the wedding, and she couldn't tell me the possible news. Until we were alone after the ceremony. It's not that I wouldn't have made the right move if it hadn't been our wedding night. I had wanted to marry Lydia for a long time, long before I proposed to her. We were already living together then. We had been a couple for exactly 5 years, and the wedding had been planned for many months. For me, at that moment, Lydia was the one. She may have been late at the time, but now she was constantly late. She was definitely late for our 8th wedding anniversary, 2 years ago. I was here, waiting for her alone, looking at that brick wall, warned in advance by a similar message about being late on the old phone, and I waited until 9 p.m., until I had to vacate the table, leaving the room full of selfish lovers, as I shamefully alone left on the day St. Valentine's. I insisted on paying the approximate cost of dinner for two at the front counter before leaving. Joseph, the restaurant owner, apologized for asking me to leave, but it was Valentine's Day and everyone was booked for the next session. This was just 5 or 6 weeks before the first lockdown began. I met Lydia at a wedding at the end of January 15 years ago when we were both about 24 years old. I knew the groom as a friend from college. She went to school with the bride. I was working inconvenient hours from midday to midnight at a newspaper almost every night, and I didn't really have a girlfriend or many opportunities to get one. Lydia studied hard to become a lawyer and prepared for her exams, so she also came to the wedding alone. During our conversations, we discovered that we live in the same city and go to work in London every day. My scheduled off days were Tuesday and Wednesday at the time, and she suggested we meet in a couple of weeks on Wednesday. We checked our schedules and set a date for February 14th at this family restaurant that I had never eaten at before. Lydia explained that she was a waitress here during school and college holidays and even on weekends while she was still at school. If this date goes well, she said, we'll exchange phone numbers and move on. I only noticed the significance of the date when I returned home. Then I thought, this must be a joke, stranger's first date on Valentine's Day. Is this real because she's a pretty girl, and I'm just a normal guy, so obviously she's teasing me? I assumed she was just playing a trick on me and would probably tell the bride when she returned from her honeymoon. She said she'd book a table so at least the joke wouldn't cost me money. But as the date started to approach and there were only a few days left, I wondered if it was possible that she was actually interested. If she is truly interested in me and I let her down, my name will be tarnished with my old college friend, and I will never get a chance with this beauty again. And if she's really being funny, it won't cost me anything if I show up at the appointed time, and if she doesn't show up within, say, 10 minutes, I'll leave and the restaurant can take that table without too much trouble. When I arrived on time and asked the head waiter if there was a reservation in the name of Lydia Davis, he replied, "Of course, sir, she is waiting for you." And there she was, beautiful as a picture and absolutely irresistible. As I said, I have always worked with deadlines and am used to getting everything done on time. I thought a Be My Valentine first date card would be too cheesy and embarrassing for both of us, so I talked to the studio boss at the print shop, and one of the country's leading cartoonists drew me a stunning card that said, "Be my Valentine next year," with a caricature of me with heavy chains around my chest, held in place by a huge padlock and a pulsating heart behind all that metal, and a brilliant caricature of Lydia, with her features taken from one of the wedding photos, holding a burning acetylene torch and with an open welding helmet on his head, with the inscription, "Open my heart, but please don't melt it." She laughed when she opened the envelope and saw a card signed, "A fan who wants to get to know you better." We realized quite quickly that we were comfortable with each other and agreed to date over the course of the evening, then became an exclusive couple, and after a couple of months of passionate courtship, we moved into my small apartment as a couple. We exchanged wedding rings a couple of years later, but it was another 3 years before we got married and started looking for a family home in our hometown. We were both committed to our career plans. By this time, I was a sub-editor writing regular articles on weekends, and I knew it would be many years before I became a full-time editor. So when our baby Sam was about 2 years old, Lydia wanted to go back to work as a lawyer specializing in corporate law, and I became a freelancer and stay-at-home mom. Our youngest, Katie, was a surprise child, unplanned but loved just like Sam, and Lydia only spent a couple of months with Katie before returning to work. For Katie, I was both dad and mom for all of her 6 years of life. Sam is easy and stable in his dependence on family life. Lydia was happy to return to work immediately after Katie, pleased to have gained a junior partnership. Lately, Lydia seems to be unhappy with me. Last February, we were in the middle of quarantine and everything was closed, so I ordered Chinese takeout and I left Lydia's untouched portion in the fridge when I went to bed alone. Work, she said, was the same excuse that was already getting old then. As a lawyer specializing in mergers and acquisitions, she says, there's always an important prospectus that needs to be prepared or a fresh rebuttal to a takeover that requires the focus of all the firm's legal minds late into the night several times a week. This year, I booked a table from 7 p.m. to closing weeks in advance and had already prepaid the expected bill for up to 4 average a la carte dishes and drinks at Joseph's when I stopped by a few weeks ago. He protested that it was unnecessary, I was an old customer, and reminded me that Lydia had once worked there as a waitress during college, so he said there was some kind of excuse between his restaurant and my family, but I insisted on him accepting my payment. I'm not used to this view of the restaurant, sitting with my back to the wall, although I understand why it was Lydia's favorite place. It was a nice place, even without a radiator in the cold winter, I thought. You can see everyone entering this part of the restaurant. You can see the bar and even the front entrance to the restaurant. All I could see from my usual spot was my dinner companion and the brick wall behind me. It's no surprise that my wife chose this table of ours. I remembered the message that sounded on my mobile phone. Sorry, dear, I'm still at work. I'm 60 minutes late. This message said more to me than words. Even L and 8 meant 2 less keys spent on me and more precious time on something else. I smiled for the 3rd time that day at this message, a smile without humor. This morning, I haven't reminded Lydia about the dinner date and time or even mentioned our anniversary since last year. Now I was here, sitting like a lemon, alone, and Lydia was busy somewhere else. Even, apparently, on Valentine's Day and our 10th wedding anniversary, she had something more important. 10 is the symbol of the 10th anniversary. A 10th anniversary gift, along with diamonds, or colors of silver or blue. This reminded me that the woman sitting alone at the table next to me was wearing a blue dress. I could still faintly smell her perfume, or maybe just the memory of it. They were completely different from the ones my wife has preferred over the years. Different tastes lead to different choices, I suppose. I wondered if the woman in blue was sitting there, temporarily alone, here celebrating a similar anniversary, on a date with a boyfriend, husband, lover, or simply favored a blue dress tonight from her wardrobe. I didn't have much of an appetite that evening, but I put my mobile phone on the table and took the menu. I thought I'd order an appetizer, if only to warm myself up a little with a few sips of the wine I asked the waiter to pour me from Lydia's favorite bottle. This wasn't my usual drink, but I wasn't in the mood for something stronger. Maybe later at home I'll make myself a sandwich and maybe have a beer. Looks like we've both been set up. Came a husky female voice from the table next to me, barely louder than the background noise so that it intruded into my cold solitude like a hot knife. I looked left and right. Although the lighting was dim, neither our candle nor hers were yet lit. Her open face, dark brown eyes, and soft, dark, wavy hair, her hair, falling to her shoulders and framing her face, was true beauty. Sorry, I said. I was away. Were these dreams? She asked softly when I turned my attention to her. An uncertain but inviting smile flashed on her lips. Maybe, I shrugged. I glanced at my phone and back at her. She's still at work. She talks, she's late, she talks. I'm not sure she'll even come tonight. For the last time. I hesitated. Too much information for a stranger expecting a nice romantic dinner. Then I thought, to hell, I've been holding this in for too long, and today. I leaned over and quietly said, last time she didn't come at all. Last time? What? Last week or when? Last year? No, sorry, not last year. Actually, 2 years ago. Because, I said. She nodded, shaking those beautiful soft curls. I noticed that her dark brown hair was styled in loose bouncy rings. So at this time, on this day, 2 years ago, it was our 8th anniversary. This year, tonight, it's another anniversary, our 10th anniversary. Oh my God, 10 is. Aluminum. Tin, like a tin of beans or cookies or maybe peaches in syrup. I was actually thinking a can of worms, but that was too intimate for a stranger, no matter how young and beautiful she was or looked. Or tomato soup, she added with a sad smile, probably full of her unhappy memories. Comfort food. I think of cans in the pantry as comfort food. Something to open when everything goes wrong, like beans on toast or spaghetti with letters. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Everything is fine. I think she's busy with something else today, I said. Who is she, a doctor or a nurse? She asked. For some professions, their work is vital, but staff is a completely different matter. Sometimes the shift can't come or not everyone can come, and those who are left have to continue to work. Life and death situations can be more important even than, well. No, she's a lawyer. Oh, I see. Earthly scum, isn't it? I softened my words with a smile and a shrug, as if pretending that this was a joke. She is a stranger, passing the time with a lonely old man, waiting for her boyfriend or woman. She doesn't need to know about all the crap I've been living with for a couple of years now. She became a junior partner 3 years ago, and, well, the workload just took off, she says. She looked sweet, a stranger sitting next to my table, truly a child looking forward to dinner tonight with her beau. There is no need to bother her with your problems. I really didn't want to share my unhappiness, just focusing on mentally preparing myself to move on to the next stage. Well, she countered, at least she's not the headmaster. Oh, is this your profession? I asked. In a way, she said, a preschool, I'm the owner, or maybe the owner of a preschool daycare center. Not too bad, as a high school principal, you probably have a lot of cute 3- and 4-year-old kids, a good age for kids, if I remember. True, they are cute, but we start with 2-year-olds, but we have specialists who adore babies. She laughed, more to herself than to anyone else. I have to admit, I love babies too, and I hate handing some of them over to their parents at the end of the day. Oh God, I chimed in, I remember a terrible 2 years. I do remember, with a vengeance, not so much for Sam, but for Katie being a nightmare. She needed her mom, and Mom was still trying to get a junior partnership offer when Katie needed her more than her dad. They're not that bad, she laughed. At least we can give the problem kids back at the end of the day. And we always make sure they sit quietly for a snack, then dinner, and then they go to bed for quiet time, and most of them do fall asleep at least for a while. So can you put the kettle on? Absolutely, tea and biscuits for the staff, some much-needed time for yourself, she laughed. So I take it you have small children. 2, Sam 9 and Katie 6. They actually went to a local preschool from ages 3 to 4, the one at the Baptist Chapel. Is this your kindergarten? No, mine is Ferny Glen Nursery on Home Farm Road, in the retail premises of the old farm near West Green Park. What, an old barn? I asked, and she nodded. I was in the farm shop and cafe there in the converted stables. The children love the play area next to the sang walk behind the old farm. Come to think of it, I've definitely seen kindergarten signs. How many children do you have there? We have 72 registered, But since the beginning of quarantine, some have only come 2 or 3 days a week, or even only half a day. We have to be flexible, but parents have to book their places, so we have the staff we need every day to keep things legal. I mostly float around and intervene where necessary. Then my phone beeped again. "Sorry, I want to see this message," I said and took the phone. The time showed 1928. Lydia sent a message again instead of calling. "Sorry, dear, more changes in documents. I'm ordering pizza. I'll be back late." I turned to the woman. "Lydia, this is my dear wife of 10 years. She won't come tonight and apparently ordered pizza at work." "Oh, this is so sad. You bought her a card and... Is it a bottle?" "Well, this is a special occasion, and we missed each other this morning. This is not a bottle in a bottle bag. This is a vintage tin. It looks like a 1950s peach jar, except it's empty and has a removable lid so it can be used for storage." I continued, "It's a set of 6 cans, all with different labels, but I only took one with me to give to her." "Oh, that's a nice thought. Fits perfectly with the tin anniversary theme." I thought so. I realized that I was chatting and did not introduce myself. "Sorry, it's very rude of me to mention the names of my wife and children out of order and without introducing myself. My friends call me Ken." I extended my hand and accompanied it with an apologetic smile. The tables were so close together that she didn't even have to lean over to gently shake my outstretched hand. She smiled much more warmly and beautifully than I ever could. "My friends call me Lottie, but you can call me Lottie," she giggled. "Sorry, when you said my friends are calling me, I couldn't resist." I laughed with her. She had a pleasant giggle. "Well, my full name is Mackenzie. It was a name that my mother liked since one of her brothers had it as a middle name, but when I was in school, the name appeared on several American children's television shows that were popular at the time, and has always been used as a girl's name. I hated having my name shortened to Mac, so I always preferred Kenzie as a child. As I grew up in my teens, I thought Kenzie sounded childish, so I asked my friends to call me Ken. My old and best friend Tom, who I went to school with, still calls me Kenzie most of the time when we get together. I see, well, I'm Charlotte by name, but I've always been called Lottie. I like it, and it goes well with my last name, Lottie Langston. It sounds so good that I kept the name even after I let my ex-husband go." "Was he blind or just stupid?" I blurted out without thinking. Without blinking an eye, she replied, "Stupid, definitely stupid. He cheated and thought he had the right to cheat and get away with it, you pompous, immature ass." I agree, he was very stupid. I do not tolerate cheaters and liars. I think for a marriage to work there has to be complete honesty, I said, adding, "As soon as I blurted out blind and stupid, I realized that it could be interpreted, well, in a completely different way, sorry." She giggled. "I think I'm a good judge of character, with one notable exception, which you now know, of course, but you seem like a good person, and I took your words to mean that they were a compliment, not an insult, and not gave a hint that you have or had some kind of agenda. You, after all, Ken, are waiting for your wife in a romantic restaurant on the most romantic evening of the year, as they say." I waited, but now my wife hasn't come, and I don't have much of an appetite anymore. "But you were still looking at the menu just now, weren't you?" "Yes, perhaps, considering ordering an appetizer. I mean, the food here is amazing, and I thought I'd have something light. Are you, your boyfriend or fiancé also late?" "The food here is good, I know that. I worked in the kitchen here while I was studying for my degree and master's in education. No boyfriend, fiancé, or husband, I'm afraid. Single girl, divorced, as I already said, and never reached. Skin. 3.5 years. It's not that I'm resentful, I'm actually glad to be out of it. Tonight, Valentine's Day, a blind date with someone I've never met before. My sister convinced me it was time to get back in the saddle and start dating again, and they made it happen." "They? So you haven't dated anyone since your husband, or rather ex, was caught?" "My sister and my mother-in-law, actually. And my ex was comprehensively caught red-handed. He was immediately kicked out of the house, and within 6 months I got the house free of his involvement and without having to share my business, but allowed him to keep his business. You had a good prenuptial agreement then? No, it turned out that I was blind and stupidly trusting in our relationship, so there was no convenient prenuptial agreement, but I had video and audio recordings of his infidelities. Lottie laughed. Both practices, Rory and mine, were largely financed by his mother. He was the only son and his mother was quite rich. Anyway, ever since I met his mother, who holds the money and wears the pants in her second marriage to her very sweet second husband, she considered me a daughter even after the divorce. She thinks we broke up by mutual consent and blames herself for Rory's general immaturity and continues to support me. Although in the last 3 years I have increased the amount of payments just in case. My business income dropped during lockdown, but I received government help and local grants to take in more children from emergency services. And when the news spread that we were accepting children from nurses, doctors, and hospital staff, donations from local supermarkets and the public increased. So what was your ex's business, the one you left? I felt I had to ask. Dentist. Buying a stake in a successful practice costs a fortune, and Rory was handsome and charming on the surface and had the money, which opened the right doors. Once he bought a stake in a good practice with his mother's money, I think he felt that the intimate intrusion of attractive and trusting women was also an invitation to intrude a little further. Need I say more? Oh my God, he was. With the patients, with at least 3 of them, I have videos, phone records, even their clinic history plus subsequent hotel room bills, and he received a matching t-shirt. She smiled. In fact, I got the t-shirt and all the other shirts off his back too. He was as concerned about the reputation of his business and dental partners as he was about his mother's anger. This is terrible, I said, shocked. I'm surprised you're even dating. I'm sure it would put me off the relationship forever. My sister and mother-in-law insisted, since 3 years had passed since the divorce. They were very convincing in this case. At least it's a safe, crowded place to meet a stranger. Yes, I often come here to eat. 1. Mostly, although my sister often sits with me, sometimes my parents, and lately my mother-in-law has rediscovered this place. Well, I don't think your blind date is worth much. He would have to be crazy not to take advantage of such pleasant and beautiful company. Maybe he sent you a message or an apology. My phone didn't beep all evening. Look, Ken, I know you were going to order an appetizer, and I'm actually starving, my first date in 3 years, and I couldn't touch a bite during lunch. Even tea and biscuits after the kids have gone to bed. No, even then, I was too nervous, but you seem like a nice married guy, with no obvious agenda, and I see the head waiter turning away another couple at the door who don't have a reservation. Maybe we could share one table between us and free up another for a couple to celebrate their romantic dinner. Well, since Lydia is going to eat pizza and won't come home until later this evening. And the kids are with the grandparents, like you said, so we could continue this interesting conversation and enjoy some delicious food and also do a good job for the romantic couple who might otherwise be turned away because the place is full tonight. It's a night for lovers, so yes, we could share a table and make room. Shall I go to your table? Why don't I go to yours? If your wife does come, you will see her and warn me so that I can prepare my purse in case we fight. She laughed at the thought, and so did I. As Lottie spoke, she stood up and waved to the head waiter, indicating with limited hand movements that she was moving towards my table. The head waiter nodded and waved back in understanding, then turned to the new customers, the older couple, picked up a couple of menus and led them in our direction. I moved the bottle bag and envelope that was in the opposite place to the floor to the right of my chair to be out of the way. I'm sure it won't come to a fight, Lottie. She's not the jealous type, Ken. In other circumstances, perhaps, but like you, although obviously long before your time, she worked here as a waitress and is well known to the owners and their children who work here. So seeing me sitting with another woman at our regular table, booked in our name, Knowing that she was expected any time after 7 p.m., it clearly wouldn't have been my fling. I'm sure she would have seen it that way. It is there, a chance meeting in complete innocence and a reasonable decision for everyone. She must be an understanding woman, your wife, she said, taking off her coat and sitting down in the seat that would have been mine if Lydia had been here. I noticed that she didn't bring any drink with her. I have a bottle of Chianti here, which I won't finish myself since I'm driving. So may I invite you to join me for a drink? That's very nice of you, Ken, thank you. Nice to know there are still gentlemen out there. I wasn't sure what my date would want, so I didn't order in advance. There is no need to wait any longer, and as my guest at my table, I want you to know that I have already paid the bill in advance, so you can choose whatever you want from the menu at my expense. That's very kind, Ken. Your wife is a very lucky woman. You need to tell her this. I'll definitely tell you if she comes, she smiled in response. While I poured Lottie's wine and topped up my glass, a couple who had recently arrived at the entrance were ushered to Lottie's table by the head waiter. They were a much older couple than us, not that we were a couple, and I guessed they were in their 60s or even 70s. I warned Lottie they were coming, and she simply smiled back. I thought Rory was an idiot for losing this girl. In fact, any person who cheats was an idiot in my opinion. If the relationship is not working, then you need to discuss the problems and work together to solve them. And if ending is the only solution, then you need to end it together. As for the blind date, he was a fool for not taking the chance with this woman, especially if her mother and sister were just as, or at least half as beautiful. As the elderly woman walked between us to get to the seat by the radiator, I caught the smell of her perfume, an old, somehow familiar smell, though I couldn't be sure what it was. Probably something cool, like Chanel, as far as I was concerned. It definitely smelled like it had to be expensive. The head waiter lit their candle first, then turned, lingered a little near ours, and looked at me with raised eyebrows. I nodded, he lit a candle and left. Looking up, I saw Lottie more clearly in the soft, flickering light than the side glance I was forced to direct in her direction because of our seats. Dark, soft curls fell over her shoulders, perfectly framing her beautiful face, smooth features, dark brown eyes with the whites of the sclera, long and dark eyelashes under the thin arches of the eyebrows, full and red lips. She looked up and smiled. A slight dimple appeared on her left cheek, her right cheek, on my left side, hidden by a curl. I heard the rustling of my new neighbor to the left as she shifted in her seat to take off her winter coat, removing her arms from the sleeves and letting her coat hang carelessly over the back of her chair inside out. While she was getting comfortable, she leaned towards me and said, "Thank you, my dears, for making room for us. Henry was sure he made the reservation weeks ago, but they didn't find our letter before they checked. What was that, dear?" She turned to her husband opposite. He looked older than I caught a glimpse of her as they approached. His face was long and thin, deeply wrinkled and tanned, as if he worked hard outside or was a keen gardener. "In the spam folder, honey," he said, though I was sure I received a confirmation right away. Arriving 10 minutes early is not a problem. Although Pat's accent was that of a duchess, or at least a lady, Henry was no lord. I was born and raised in this mixed urban and semi-rural town and region, and its accent was local, with more rural than urban. The woman turned to me again. "We saw the head waiter look in your direction as we entered, and when Henry told him our names, I looked around and couldn't help but wonder why you were sitting alone at neighboring tables on this traditionally romantic evening. But when your young lady stood up and moved over, your table suddenly became vacant. Very lucky for us. In any case, thank you very much. I'm Pat and my husband is Henry. We're celebrating our 46th anniversary today. What are you celebrating?" She spoke with a perfect accent that seemed genuine and not a fake telephone voice. She looked regal to match the accent, age uncertain, but I thought she must be at least in her 60s, much younger than her husband Henry. Her features were open, with high cheekbones and sparkling, intelligent eyes that had that sparkle of joy and, dare I say, mischief in them. She had that timeless, classic beauty that persists in so few women of the age of certain Hollywood or London stage actresses who can convincingly play 30-year-olds while celebrating careers that spanned 4 decades. Lottie spoke before I could gather my thoughts and utter an embarrassed answer. "We are Ken and Lottie, Pat, Henry, so nice to see you here. 46 years, wow, how wonderful. Now, Ken and I are actually strangers meeting for the first time tonight. We've known each other for less than an hour, more like 46 minutes than years in my opinion, but I think we're quickly becoming friends. We had a wonderful conversation, and Ken's such a nice gentleman to have around." Ken's wife of 10 years, Lydia, was supposed to share a table with him today for their 10th anniversary, but is running late. She works long hours as a lawyer, a junior partner in her firm, and just announced via text that she's ordering pizza at work. I mean, honestly, pizza out of a box when she could be dining at the best family restaurant in this town. What was she thinking? As for me, Pat, I am currently single. My blind date is still in the dark, perhaps wandering somewhere and not yet arrived. I was abandoned at the peak, so Ken very kindly invited me to join him to free up a table, and he even shared his drink with me. Isn't that nice of him? Pat turned from Lottie to me. "Lottie is absolutely right. You are a gentleman, Ken, a rare gem these days, and if your wife would rather work than celebrate such an important date on the calendar with the most important man in her life, then there must be a reasonable explanation for it. Is she protecting an innocent man whose lifelong freedom is at stake?" I couldn't help but grin. She was right. I was in such a stupid and unreasonable situation that it didn't make sense, and I thought, why do I have to make excuses? She's a corporate lawyer, in fact, if I may put it this way. She's a jackass lawyer, no less, and what she's doing to me, our children, and our marriage is unreasonable to the point that I don't intend to put up with it 1 minute longer, let alone for the next 36 years. Pat reached out and squeezed my left forearm. I looked down and realized that I had clenched my fists tightly on the table in front of me. Lottie leaned towards me and grabbed my right fist with both hands. "There are no apologies for expressing passion and pain, darling," Pat whispered softly in my ear, so close that I could feel her breath. "Lydia is a stupid woman when her own marriage is under threat." I relaxed my fists, eased the tension in my back, and exhaled. My eyes filled with tears, and I felt the tension that had been building up all day come out, and I felt better. "What's going on, Ken?" A familiar voice came from above, which I instantly recognized, despite the tears. I raised my head and blinked the tears away from my eyes and saw my wife Lydia standing slightly behind and to the right of Lottie, looking down at the table where I was holding hands with two women. Although I unclenched my fists, I felt that Lottie and Pat were still holding my hands. "Oh, hi, honey, you finally came, and you were only an hour late," I said. "I have a gift for you, but my hands are full right now." "I see it," she barked. "I returned home early after a call from my mother. The children wanted to say good night, and then they said that you are here for us." She hesitated. "Lady Patricia, what are you doing here, and why are you holding Ken's hand?" "Hello, Lydia dear, long time no see, how are you?" Pat smiled at her. "Smart business suit, honey, came straight from work." Yeah, I tried to go home and change clothes, but something was wrong with my key. How did you, and oh hi, Mr. Langston, didn't notice you." "Hi, Lydia," Henry smiled at her. Then Lydia noticed Lottie sitting opposite me. "Lottie, what the hell?" "Hi, Liddy, never had the pleasure of meeting your husband before." Lottie glanced at her briefly before turning her attention back to me, flashing me one of her beautiful smiles and squeezing my hand. "I think he's very nice, and with or without your permission, Lyd, I'd like to get to know him better, much better." Lydia stood as if in shock. "If you want to get your gifts," I told Lydia, "well, one gift and an envelope, you'll have to pick them up. They are here by my chair. My hands are full with Lottie and, is it Lady Patricia and Sir Henry?" "Lady Patricia Langston, dear boy," said Pat, now holding my left hand with her left and patting my forearm with her right. I am Rory's mother, Lottie's mother-in-law, but I do consider her my only daughter and want her to be happy, as she clearly deserves. And as for my dear Henry, I was a bus driver, Ken, and a private chauffeur when I met Rory's mother, Henry said. And for a while, I was a pretty good bass player in a rock band. So I'm just Mr. and was happy and grateful to stay with Pat, even though I was playing on the road with headliners all over the world. What group was it? I asked. Three voices together answered, All's Well. Gordon Bennett's backing band? Yes. We were kids who grew up together, Henry smiled, playing for fun in church halls in the early to mid-60s while we were learning to play, doing Beatles and Stones covers on the weekends, until Pat and I met. Then I had to quickly step up and make something of myself, especially after Lord Burghley disowned my sweet new wife for following his heart, and I had to become the breadwinner, so I became an impresario and did quite well, and still played as a guest when he could. Indeed, Henry was my second husband, Pat admitted. I was married off at 18 to someone only Dad approved, but Rupert was a complete ass, and I divorced him against Dad's wishes within a year and married Henry here, who admittedly held up very well considering he played guest appearances with headliners all over the world, and we traveled together before and after the birth of our child. He was the manager of many bands and impresario of concerts and festivals. And he always forgets to mention to people he's just met that he was knighted for services to the music industry over 20 years ago. It was fun, but I don't think Rory ever needed anything and never grew up, Henry said. We only recently found out about the rumors and Rory admitted that his failed marriage was his fault. So we're looking out for Lottie's best interests now. Pat winked at me. You mean, but, I muttered. Oh no, Lydia intervened, stomping her foot. This can't be. Lottie, Lady Pat, released my husband immediately. He is mine. Tusk tusk, Pat shook her head, looking at Lydia. How could you treat your husband like this and endanger the happiness of your children? I swear the blood drained from Lydia as if a faucet had turned on, her lips moving. What do you mean? Lydia, Lottie said, my sister Maria told me about today's reservation a couple of months ago, about how you missed your 8th anniversary here altogether and even ruined your parents' ruby wedding here in November by not showing up, and that Ken had booked this table for the whole evening, ready to wait if you let him down again. He was going to wait here until you came, no matter how late it was. As you know, my father-in-law, Henry, has a lot of legal contacts here to dig up dirt or bury dirt on his managed groups, and he's found out all about your firm. Shame on you, Lydia. No, but you couldn't, Lydia cried. We were so careful. Not so careful, Liddy, Pat said before turning to me. Lawyers love to brag and gossip in their circles, so secrets spread quickly among them, Ken. We were able to contact some of the sources for your investigative articles and gave them hints that we thought would get through to you. Sorry for the rigging tonight, but we are here to support you in any need. Well, I said, that explains a lot. I was surprised that my investigator was able to find out so much in just a couple of months. But honey, you bought me a card and a gift for sure. Lydia left the rest unsaid, picking up a heavy envelope and a very light bottle bag. She tore the envelope open, and as soon as she saw the front of the card, she dropped it. When it fell on the table, it opened and folded papers with the heading, Dissolution of Marriage, spilled out, extinguishing the candle and spilling hot wax on the whitey tablecloth. The front of the card featured a cartoon of Ken's heart being smashed into pieces by a sledgehammer representing Lydia, with the caption, You broke my heart on Valentine's Day. And on the speech bubble of Lydia's cartoon, it was written, I have new partners. I couldn't find the original cartoonist who did our first Valentine, Lydia. He retired and disappeared to Spain, but found one just as good on Fever, I said. You haven't opened your gift yet, honey. Lydia held the pen in her hand. She opened the lid and looked inside, a puzzled expression appearing on her tear-stained face. Tin? She asked, pulling it out of the empty gift bag. It's one of 6, Lottie added, but Ken only brought one. They are useful for kitchen storage. Oh, she's making noise, lid. I wonder what's inside. Lydia removed the clear plastic lid and looked inside before emptying the two contents into her palm. "What is this?" she asked. "My wedding ring. I don't need it anymore," I replied. "I took it off 3 weeks ago, and you didn't notice, or didn't indicate that you noticed." And the second item is a flash drive containing several hundred photographs and 4 films that my investigator obtained from the luxurious third-floor apartment that your partners share with you in Market Square. They were obtained illegally, so they cannot be admissible in court, but would be devastating for you and your company if, say, they were leaked to the public. I only watched 2 minutes of one video, which was more than enough to end my marriage. My lawyer reviewed everything he told me, and my investigator was able to identify 4 individuals as partners in your firm, and we named them as partners in the divorce document. Agree to the terms, Lydia, giving me full custody of the children and the house until the last child completes further education, and we will change the divorce on the grounds of infidelity to the ground of unreasonable behavior, that is, your absence from the life of your husband and children. Otherwise, we'll go with what we've got and see how long your partner's marriages last, like mine. I will let you visit the children as often as you want. In fact, you will see them in the morning, since they are spending the night at your parents' place, where you will sleep. I changed all the locks in the house today." "Oh shit," she exclaimed, dropping her empty bag and putting both hands to her face. "That's why I couldn't get into the house to change clothes. I just realized it was our anniversary when my mom called me. I answered because I thought something was wrong with Dad or the kids. Mom called only because the children were spending the night there and wanted to say goodnight before bed. They already kissed you goodbye when you left them this morning. Oh shit, I really screwed up, didn't I?" "No bullshit, Sherlock," I replied. "We're done, I think." I looked up and saw the restaurant manager, Joseph, and his wife, Maria, approaching the table. I assumed we were creating a little scene. "Sorry to bother you, Joseph," I said, getting up with some difficulty as Lottie and Pat were still holding my hands. "I think I'm ready to go." "There's no need to go, Ken," Joseph reassured, "but I think Lydia should go. Lydia, you will always be welcome here, but not now. Today is an evening for romantic lovers, not for cheaters." Lydia ran through the restaurant, tears streaming down her cheeks. Joseph's wife, Maria, turned to me. "Don't worry about Lydia getting to her parents' house. Joe Jr. will drive her, and Lady Pat's driver will follow them and bring Joe back." "Well, what do you think about my sister?" "Who?" I asked, confused. "My little sister, Lottie here. She's the youngest member of the family, hasn't been treated well by her man, and we were all hoping that you could help each other through the pain and let Lottie know there are still good guys out there." Although I stood up, Pat and Lottie were still holding my hands. I sat down again. "Good boy, Ken," Maria said and kissed my forehead, then wiped off my lipstick with her thumb. "I'll send your waiter to get your order, okay?" "Yeah, okay," I said, looking at Lottie. "Are you okay?" She smiled back. "Yes, Ken, absolutely fine." "Okay, shall we order?" "Please, after all this worry, I'm even hungrier." "So, former chef Lottie, what would you recommend for an appetizer?" "I have a few ideas," she smiled. "The first is that you could write down my birthday, July 23rd, in your diary. We could have dinner here." "Great, I'll leave the next dishes up to you, Lottie, and send a photo of your portrait to the new cartoonist." Yes, I felt much more romantic than I did at the start of Valentine's Day. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.